Welcome back to another exciting project, and I'm glad you're here to follow along step by step as we build something fun and interactive. In this project, we are going to create a fully functional and visually appealing image slider that you can use on your own websites. As you can see from the final version of the project, we have an image slider that automatically changes images every few seconds, for example, every 5 seconds, giving it a smooth, dynamic look. In addition to the automatic sliding, we also have two buttons here, one to go to the previous image and one to go to the next image. As you can observe, when we click on the previous button, the slider moves to the previous image, and if we are on the first image, it automatically loops around to the last image. Similarly, when we reach the last image and click the next button, the slider seamlessly returns to the first image, creating a continuous and smooth user experience. We have also added a very attractive box shadow and beautiful modern icons from Font Awesome to enhance the overall design and make the slider look professional. In the next section, we are going to begin building our project by creating the HTML structure, which will serve as the foundation for everything else. After we finish the HTML, we will move on to styling the slider using CSS to make it look visually appealing. And finally, we will implement all the functionality using JavaScript so it works perfectly. So, I'll see you in the next section, where we will start coding and bring this interactive image slider to life step by step. Let's begin creating our image slider project. Our first step is to launch Visual Studio Code. Let's go ahead and close the Get Started tab now. From the File menu, we select Open Folder to create our new project. We can create this project anywhere we like. I am creating my project on the desktop, but feel free to choose any location you prefer on your computer. Let's navigate to the desktop and then click the New Folder button. We will name this folder Image Slider for our project. We press the Enter key to confirm our folder name and then click the Select Folders button. Let's close that Get Started tab again, and over in the Explorer section on the left, we will right-click and select New File. Let's create our HTML file and name it index.html. On the right side, we can see our index.html file, which is currently empty, and we can use an exclamation mark to generate the basic HTML5 structure. We simply type an exclamation mark and then select the first suggestion that appears. A helpful trick is using Alt-C to turn on word wrap, which makes all the code visible. Now, let's look at the document type declaration, which tells the browser which version of HTML this page uses. In this project, we are specifically using HTML5. Next, we have the HTML tag that wraps around both the head and body sections. The lang attribute specifies the language for the page. We are setting the language to English. Now, inside the head tag, we find important metadata and the page title. This first meta tag defines the encoding for the HTML characters. This encoding is called UTF-8, and it is the recommended standard for HTML5. This is a great choice because it contains nearly every character and symbol we could possibly need. The next metadata tag instructs Internet Explorer to utilize its most modern rendering engine. The viewport metadata gives the browser instructions for controlling the page's size. This first part of the meta tag instructs the browser to match the page width to your device's screen width. This ensures the page width adapts to fit any mobile screen perfectly. The second part initializes the initial zoom level for the page. We are setting that initial zoom level to 100%. Now, let's talk about the title tag, which is where we define the title of our page. To see this title in action, we can open the browser. To see this in a browser, we can use the Live Preview extension we installed earlier. To show the live preview, we right-click on the file and select Show Preview. You can now see the browser preview on the right, showing the default title, Documents, that is generated from this line of code. Of course, we can customize the title of our page right here. Let's change this title to Image Slider, which is the name of our project. We can see the updated title here, and now let's add a container in the body section for our images, which we will call the slider container. We are going to create a div element with a class of slider container we select the auto suggestion to generate the div element. Let's close the Explorer panel by dragging this divider to the left. Now inside this container, we will create another div specifically to hold all of our images. Let's assign this div a class of image_container and press enter to accept the auto suggestion. For the image source, we will use a service called LoremPixum. Now let's open our web browser and we will search for LoremPixum. I just noticed I missed the letter S there. Let's click on the link for pixum.photos, which is LoremPixum. The great thing about this website is that you don't need to sign up to get images, and it's powered by the Unsplash service. The best part about using this website is that you don't need to sign up or get any kind of API key. For instance, if you need a random image that is 200 by 300 pixels, you can simply use this link format. Let's copy this URL and test it in the address bar, where you'll see a new image appear each time you paste it. While that gives us a random image, I prefer to select a specific, fixed image for our project. To select a specific image, we simply add an ID with a number. The website offers a vast collection of thousands of images. If you take a look at the list of all images here, you will find a huge collection, and these numbers represent the image IDs. For instance, if you use ID 1, you get this image, and ID 10 gives you this one, and so forth. The website offers a vast library with thousands of images available. Let's copy that link by pressing Ctrl+C, then head back to Visual Studio Code and paste it directly into the src attribute. Now we can see the image appearing, and for the alternative text section, we will simply write image. For sizing, we will set the image width to 500 pixels and the height to 300 pixels, and then we can duplicate this line about 3 more times to create a total of 4 images. The best part is that any image you add will automatically appear inside the slider. To duplicate this line, we hold down the Alt and Shift keys together and press the down arrow key 3 times. We have copied the image tag 3 times, but currently all the images are the same because we need to change their IDs. For the first image, we will keep ID 1, the second image will use ID 2, the third one gets ID 10, and the final one uses ID 20. This gives us 4 distinct images that are not random. The key point is that refreshing the page will always display these exact same images. Now, we need to place something outside of this div that has the class image_container. Next, we need to add 2 arrow buttons for navigation. To create our navigation arrows, we will use icons from the Font Awesome website. For those who are not familiar with it, Font Awesome is a popular icon library. In a new browser tab, we search for Font Awesome and navigate to their official website. Now we will search for the word angle, and the specific icon we need is the double angle. Let's use the double angle icons for our right and left arrows. First, we locate the angle double right icon and click on it to reveal the HTML tag, which consists of an I tag with the classes FAS and FA for Font Awesome. The FAS class stands for Font Awesome Solid, and the FA angle double right class defines the specific icon. We copy this icon by simply clicking on it, and then we head back to Visual Studio Code to paste it outside the image container. We cannot see the icons yet because we need to add a link to the Font Awesome CDN in the head of our document, so let's open a new tab and search for cdn.js to find that link. We just search for Font Awesome in the search bar and then click on the first result. Now we head back to Visual Studio Code and paste that link right before the closing head tag, just under the title. Now we can see the arrow icon appearing on the right, and we can duplicate this tag by pressing Alt-Shift and the down arrow. Then we change the first icon to a left-pointing arrow. That gives us both the left and right navigation arrows we need. To style these icons properly, we need to add some classes to them. For both of these icons, we hold the Control key to select them simultaneously, add a class of btn to each, press Escape, and then add prev to the first button and next to the second one. Perfect. That wraps up the HTML structure for our slider. Next, we will use CSS to style our project and make the slider look much better. So see you in the next section. In the previous section, We completed all the HTML work. Now we're ready to begin styling our project with CSS. Our first step is to create a new CSS file. To open the File Explorer, we can press Ctrl-Shift-E. We will now right-click in this empty space and select New File. Let's call the new file style.css and then press Enter to create it. Before we start styling our project, we need to link our new CSS file within the HTML code. Let's navigate back to our index.html file and place a new link tag right below the one for Font Awesome. This link tag establishes the relationship between our HTML file and the external style sheet. The href attribute specifies the destination for our link, and since both the HTML and CSS files are in the same folder, we only need to write the file name. Since both files are in the same folder, we just need to type style.css. With our CSS file properly linked, we can begin styling our project. Let's drag this divider line to close the Explorer panel and focus on writing our CSS code. Let's begin by styling the container element that wraps all our slider content. Let's contain all of the images within that container so we can focus on styling the body. Before we style the body, we will target the slider container and set its width to 500 pixels to match our images, along with a height of 300 pixels. Right now we have the container, but we can still see the other images spilling out, so we need to use overflow hidden to clip them. Now only the first image is visible because the overflow hidden property has effectively clipped the other images that extend beyond the container's boundaries. Let's move on to styling the body element now. First, we remove the default margin from the body element and apply Display Flex, which allows us to center the container horizontally using Justify Content Center, and we also set the page height to 100% of the viewport height. This means it will take up the full height of your screen from top to bottom. We can now center the items vertically using Align Items Center. Let's move forward with the rest of our styling. First, let's update the background color to a beige shade and continue styling the slider container by adding a border radius. Let's round the container's borders by setting the border radius to 10 pixels. Now let's add a box shadow to give our container a nice shadow effect. The first value we set for our box shadow is the horizontal position, which we set to 0. The next value controls the vertical shadow position, which we set to 4 pixels, followed by an 8-pixel blur radius and a custom color using RGBA. We are using black for the shadow but want it to be partially transparent. To achieve this effect, we will use the RGBA color function. To set the alpha value for opacity, we simply write 0.3 for 30%. Let's press Alt and Z together to enable word wrap so we can read the code more easily. And that completes the box shadow styling for our container. Now let's focus on styling the image container. We set the display property to flex. Our goal here is to arrange the images side by side. The reason we cannot see the other images yet is because overflow hidden is currently active. Let's temporarily remove the overflow hidden property to see all our images. Now you can observe all the images aligned horizontally because we are using display flex in our main container. What we'll achieve with JavaScript is changing the transform property, specifically the translateX function. Let's test this by applying a transform translateX property right here. Notice that when we change the value to -500 pixels, which matches the image width, the next image becomes visible inside our container. If we set the value to 1000 pixels, we move to the third image, and at 1500 pixels, we reach the final slide. For the actual functionality, we will use JavaScript, so we can delete this test code and restore the overflow hidden property. With the overflow hidden back in place, we can now focus on positioning the arrow buttons. Now we are going to target the btn class, which we previously added to both of our button icons. Next, we target the button class and set its position to absolute. You can now see the icons inside the container, but we need their absolute positioning to be relative to the parent slider container. To position these icons correctly within their parent container, we need to set the slider container's position to relative. As you can see after refreshing, the icons are now positioned inside the container. To position the icons vertically, we set the top property to 50%. Let's change the icon color to white for better visibility. Let's increase the font size to 20 pixels for better visibility. The default font size is 16 pixels, which isn't quite what we want. You can see we've used top 50%, but the icon isn't perfectly centered vertically because this property aligns the top edge of the icon to the middle of the container. To perfectly center the icons vertically, we use the transform property with the translate y function set to -50%. Perfect, and now the icons are perfectly centered. We will set the opacity of these icons to 50% to make them semi-transparent, and then we can position the left and right buttons using their specific classes. Let's target the button class for both icons. First, we style the previous button by setting its left position to 10 pixels. Then, for the next button, we position it on the right side by setting its right property to 10 pixels. Now we can see the left icon positioned 10 pixels from the left edge of its parent container, and the right icon is similarly placed 10 pixels from the right edge. To make the buttons more interactive, we can set their opacity to fully opaque on hover and change the cursor to a pointer. When you hover your mouse over these icons, you'll notice the cursor changes to a pointing hand. We use the hover CSS pseudo class to target the hovering effect, and we change the opacity to 100% by setting it to 1. Now when we hover over the icons, they become fully opaque and much clearer to see. That wraps up all the CSS styling for our project. In the next section, we will bring our project to life by adding JavaScript functionality to the icons, making the images change when you click them. We will also implement a timer to make the images automatically advance every 3 seconds. So see you in the next section. We've completed the styling phase of our project. In our previous section, we successfully styled the entire project with CSS. Now, we're going to bring our project to life by adding functionality with JavaScript. The first step is to create our JavaScript file. On the left side panel, we can open the File Explorer by pressing Ctrl-Shift-E. Then we perform a right-click to create a new file. We'll call this new file index.js and then press Enter. Let's drag this file over to this section so we can see the browser preview. We can now close the Explorer section since we are finished with it. To make our JavaScript work, we first need to connect our JavaScript file to the HTML. Let's go back to our index.html file and add a script tag just before the closing body tag by typing SC and selecting the second autocomplete option that includes the source attribute. Since both our HTML and JavaScript files are in the same folder, for the source attribute, we simply need to type index.js as the URL value. With the JavaScript file properly linked, we can begin implementing functionality. Let's navigate to our JavaScript file next. The first element we need to target is this next button. Looking at our index.html file, we can see there are 2 icons with classes named Prees and Next. The button we want to focus on is the one with the Next class. The next step involves adding an event listener to this button. When a user clicks this button, it will display the next image. In our JavaScript file, we will target the next button's class by creating a constant named nextElement and using document.querySelector with the class selector.next. We will target the class by typing .next. To see our code working in real time, we can press Alt and Z together. With the Alt-Z shortcut pressed, we can now add an event listener to our next element. Now we can attach our event listener by typing nextElement.addEventListener. The addEventListener method attaches an event handler to an element and requires 2 parameters. The first parameter is the event type, which in our case is click, written as a string inside double quotes, and the second parameter is a callback function that will execute when the click event occurs. We are going to create an arrow function here. This arrow function will execute when a click occurs. Inside this set of curly braces, we can write the code that will run. Let's create a variable to track the current image index and set it to 1. Since we're starting with the first image, each click should advance our current image counter by 1. we increment the current image by 1 each time someone clicks the button. To keep things organized, let's create a dedicated function for updating the image. We will call this function here and then define it below. Let's create this function and call it updateImage. As I mentioned earlier, we will use the transform translate x property to navigate between images. As you can see in our CSS file, we have already styled the image container. For example, if we apply a transform translate x of -500 pixels, we will see the next image. To implement this in JavaScript, we first need to remove this line. First, we need to target the image container element from our HTML file. Let's target this image container using the query selector method by creating a constant called image container element. Now that we have access to this element, we can modify its style just like we did before. Now we can change the styles by writing imageContainer.style, and we set the transform property to translate x with a value of -500 pixels. To display the third image, you would need to translate by 1000 pixels. It's important to note that the JavaScript syntax for styling is quite different from what you use in CSS. To create dynamic pixel values that correspond to our current image index, we will switch from using double quotes to a backtick string, and within that string, we will use a $sign and curly braces to insert our calculation of current image index multiplied by 500. However, if we test this now by clicking the button, we see the third image instead of the second one. The reason we see the third image is that our current image index starts at 1, and when we increment it, it becomes 2, and 2 multiplied by 500 gives us 1000 pixels. To fix this issue, we can add parentheses here and subtract 1 from this value. By default, the current image starts at 1. This initial position corresponds to 0 pixels on our slider. This means we are viewing the first image. When we click the next button, the current index becomes 2. Then 2 minus 1 equals 1, and 1 multiplied by 500 gives us 500 pixels. We can click next multiple times, but after the last image, we see nothing because we've moved beyond the available images. We need to make sure our current image index stays within bounds. At the top of our function, we need to add a condition that checks if the current image index exceeds the total number of images. To determine the total number of images, we need to select all of the image elements within our JavaScript code. To count all the images, we will use the document.querySelectorAll method. We are going to use document_query_selector_all to target all of our image elements. This query_selector_all method gathers all the image elements and stores them in this variable. To see what we've captured, we can log the images element to the console. To view the console output, we need to open the developer tools by clicking the hamburger menu icon. Let's check the console to confirm we have 3 images. You might notice we're getting an error in the console. We are encountering this error because our code is not yet complete. Let's remove that console log line to avoid the error for now. Let's check the console log output, which confirms we have retrieved all 4 image elements successfully. Let's go ahead and delete that console log and add our condition back in. We need to check if the current image index exceeds the total number of images we have. If the current image index exceeds the number of images we have, we need to reset it back to the first image. We will reset the current image back to 1. This creates a continuous loop where clicking next eventually cycles back to the first image. Let's add a smooth transition effect to the image. This will give us a smooth transition between images. Now let's add a smooth transition effect to the image container by applying a transition on the transform property we are using in our JavaScript code, setting it to 0.4 seconds with an ease in-out timing function. Now when we click to the next image, you can see the smooth transition, and when we reach the final image, it seamlessly loops back to the beginning. Now let's apply that same functionality to the previous button as well. Now let's set up the same functionality for the previous icon. Let's go back up and create a constant for the previous element, using querySelector to target its class. The class we want to target is prev, so we use a dot followed by the class name. Next, we'll add the same event listener for the previous button element to handle click events. For the previous button, we need to do the exact opposite of what we did for the next button. For the previous button, we will do the opposite by decreasing the current image index by 1. For the previous button, we decrement the current image index and then update the display. Now when we click the previous button from the first image, we don't go anywhere visually, but the code still decreases the image index. This means we need to cycle back to display the very last image. For the previous button, we need to add an else-if condition that checks if the current image index is less than 1, and if it is, we set the current image to the total number of images, which is the last image. This implements the exact opposite logic of our next button. This creates a continuous loop where we can go back to the last image and then forward to the first. Next, we will implement an automatic slideshow timer that advances the images every few seconds. To make the slideshow run automatically, we will implement the setTimeout method. We use setTimeout to create a timer that triggers a function once the specified time has elapsed, and this method requires two parameters. The first parameter is a function to execute, and the second is the delay duration in milliseconds. We set the timer for 3000 milliseconds, which equals 3 seconds, and instruct it to increase the current image index by 1 before calling the updateImage function. This function call will then execute the updateImage function we created earlier. When the code reaches this line and calls the function, it will then proceed to the timer, and after 3 seconds, the function inside runs again, increasing the image index and creating a continuous loop. The issue arises when you click the buttons repeatedly, which causes multiple timers to accumulate simultaneously. To prevent multiple timers from stacking up, we need to reset the timer whenever these buttons are clicked. To reset the timer, we can use a method called clearTimeout. First, we need to create a variable called timeout to store our timer, and we assign the setTimeout function to this variable so we can clear it later. We will set that here by writing timeout inside the parentheses, and we must also do this for the previous button. To reset the timer, we call clearTimeout and pass in the timeout variable. The automatic slideshow now runs smoothly when the page loads, and the timer resets whenever you use the next or previous buttons, preventing any interruption to your navigation. Another great feature is that we can easily add more images to our project by copying an existing image and changing its ID. You can see that it automatically shows us 5 images instead of 4. You can see the 5th image appear, and the buttons continue to work perfectly. The best part is that we can easily add or remove images, and the project will continue to work perfectly because we dynamically calculate the total number of images instead of using a fixed number like 4 or 5. That was it for our project, and I really hope you had a great time following along and building it step by step. I also hope you enjoyed the process and learned several new and useful concepts that you can apply in your future projects. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next project where we'll continue learning and creating together.